Japanese soldiers in World War II, the Empire's relentless shadow. Did you know that the Japanese soldier of World War II was often told that surrender was worse than death? For many of them, the war never truly ended. Some fought until their last breath. Others hid in jungles for decades, waiting for orders that would never come. Their story is one of loyalty, endurance, and the deep shadows of an empire that demanded absolute devotion. When Japan entered World War II in 1941, its soldiers believed they were fighting for a divine purpose. The emperor was not just their ruler. He was their living god. Every soldier carried this belief like armor. To fight for him was to fight for eternity. To die for him was to achieve honor beyond the mortal world. From the frozen fields of Manchuria to the burning islands of the Pacific, this faith guided millions of men into one of the most brutal wars in history. The Imperial Japanese Army had long been trained under the Bushido Code, the ancient way of the samurai. It meant discipline, sacrifice, and obedience. The soldier was taught that his life belonged not to himself, but to the nation. Before battle, many wrote farewell letters to their families, fully expecting not to return. In their pockets, they carried small flags inscribed with prayers and signatures from loved ones. These were called *Hinomaru Yozagaki, tokens of courage and farewell. Let's drift back to the beginning of their story. Japan had been modernizing for decades, but the spirit of its feudal past still lingered. The nation's military grew stronger after victories against China in 1895 and Russia in 1905. Success fed a growing belief that Japan was destined to lead Asia. When the 1930s arrived, this idea had hardened into imperial ambition. Soldiers were told that Japan was the rightful guardian of Asia's future. They would liberate it from Western powers, or so they were told. In 1937, Japan invaded China. What began as a regional conflict turned into a nightmare of unimaginable scale. The war in China tested every limit of endurance and morality. Cities like Nanjing became symbols of horror. Japanese troops, driven by years of propaganda and dehumanizing orders, committed acts that would stain their history forever. Yet to many of those soldiers, they were simply following commands. Disobedience meant disgrace, and disgrace was a fate worse than death. By 1941, Japan's military machine was vast. Its navy rivaled the West. Its army stood hardened by years of fighting. The nation's leaders believed the time had come to strike boldly. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The strike was swift and stunning. Within hours, the United States was at war. And across the Pacific, tens of thousands of Japanese soldiers prepared to face a new and powerful enemy. They advanced through Southeast Asia like a storm. The fall of Singapore in 1942 shocked the world. British forces, thought to be unbeatable in Asia, surrendered to Japan. For the first time, the Japanese soldiers seemed unstoppable. Discipline, speed, and the will to die rather than retreat made their armies fearsome. Allied prisoners often described them as silent and relentless, marching through jungles and swamps with an almost supernatural endurance. But that endurance came at a cost. The conditions they lived under were harsh. Many soldiers marched barefoot for miles, carrying heavy packs through thick jungle heat. Disease spread quickly. Food was scarce. Rice mixed with insects and water from muddy streams became their daily meal. Still, they fought on. The sense of duty was stronger than hunger or pain. Let's float now to one of their most iconic battlefields, Guadalcanal. It was here that the myth of Japanese invincibility began to crumble. The Americans fought back fiercely. Jungle warfare was cruel and chaotic. Japanese soldiers, often cut off from supplies, resorted to desperate measures. Some starved to death still clutching their rifles. Others launched suicidal night attacks, screaming banzai, as they charged into machine gun fire. It was courage, but it was also tragedy. The Japanese command believed that surrender dishonored the empire. This belief shaped the entire war. Soldiers were ordered to fight to the last man. When surrounded, they took their own lives rather than be captured. On islands like Saipan and Iwo Jima, these scenes repeated over and over. Civilians were even told that surrender meant torture or death. Many jumped from cliffs, holding their children, believing they were protecting their honor. On Iwo Jima, in 1945, Japanese soldiers dug deep tunnels beneath the island. They turned it into a fortress of fire and stone. General Tadamichi Kurobayashi, their commander, knew he could not win. But he believed that his men could slow the American advance, perhaps long enough for Japan to negotiate peace. For 36 days, they fought in darkness, smoke, and death. The Americans eventually captured the island, but at a terrible cost. Almost every Japanese soldier died. Back in Japan, news of these battles was reported as victories. The public never saw the despair of the front lines. Letters from soldiers were censored. Families received only official words of bravery and honor. The truth was buried beneath propaganda. By the time American bombers reached Tokyo, many soldiers still believed Japan could win. Even as cities burned, they prepared to fight to the end. And then came Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The atomic bomb ended what bravery and sacrifice could not. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945, but not every soldier heard that message. In the dense jungles of the Philippines, Guam, and Indonesia, small units of Japanese troops remained hidden. Some thought the surrender announcement was a trick. Others simply refused to believe it. They stayed in the wilderness, surviving on roots and wild animals, waiting for orders from a dead empire. One of the most famous of these men was Hiroo Onoda. A lieutenant stationed in the Philippines, he refused to surrender for nearly 30 years. He believed his duty to the emperor was eternal. Even as the world changed around him, he remained in the jungle, repairing his rifle, polishing his boots, and carrying out patrols. It was not until 1974 that he finally returned to Japan after his former commander personally came to relieve him of duty. These holdouts were not alone. Others were discovered in remote corners of the Pacific years after the war. Some had married local women. Some had built small shelters and lived quietly, still loyal to an empire that no longer existed. For them, time had stopped in 1945. Let's pause for a moment and reflect on what made these soldiers so different. Their loyalty was not only to the emperor, but also to an idea, the belief that personal sacrifice served something eternal. It was both noble and tragic. The same devotion that created acts of heroism also led to unimaginable suffering. In the post-war years, Japan would transform itself into a peaceful nation. The old army was gone. The samurai code had faded into memory. But the image of the World War II, Japanese soldier, the man who never surrendered, remains one of the most haunting symbols in modern history. Yet there is another side to this story. Many of these soldiers were not villains. They were young men, often teenagers, shaped by a system that demanded obedience. They followed orders with faith, not cruelty. Some wept when forced to harm civilians. Others risked their lives to protect prisoners. War had stripped them of choice, but not always of humanity. Even today, the legacy of these soldiers divides opinion. Some see them as instruments of an imperial nightmare. Others view them as victims of their own leader's ambition. The truth lies somewhere between. The Japanese soldier of World War II was more than just a fighter. He was a symbol of an entire era of devotion pushed beyond reason, of pride that turned into tragedy. From the burning sands of Burma to the silent jungles of the Pacific, his story is written in endurance and sorrow. And as the tide of history moved on, the echo of his footsteps faded. But somewhere deep in the Pacific forests, you can still imagine him, watchful, silent, and waiting for an order that will never come. Inside the mind of the Japanese soldier, faith, fear, and the emperor's shadow. When we look at the Japanese soldier of World War II, it's easy to see only the uniform, the rifle, and the discipline. But inside that uniform lived a man molded by years of spiritual conditioning. His courage was real, yet it was not born from freedom. It was shaped by centuries of belief, propaganda, and unbreakable loyalty to the emperor. From the first day of training, a Japanese recruit was stripped of individuality. He was no longer a son, a brother, or a student. He became a living tool of the empire. Drill instructors shouted lessons not just of tactics, but of morality. Obey without question. Think of death as lighter than a feather. Think of duty as heavier than a mountain. These words echoed through every barracks. They were not just orders. They were the rhythm of a nation at war. Let us pause and step into a Japanese training camp in 1938. The air is thick with humidity and sweat. Rows of young men stand motionless, their shaved heads glistening under the morning sun. An officer paces in front of them, his boots striking the ground with mechanical precision. When he stops, silence follows. He raises his sword slightly, points to the rising sun flag behind him, and says, "This is the soul of Japan." The recruits bow deeply. None dare to look up. The education of these men began long before they wore a uniform. Japanese schools in the 1930s taught children that their emperor was divine. Textbooks describe Japan as a sacred land chosen to bring light to Asia. Stories of ancient warriors and gods filled classrooms. Boys were told that dying for their country was the highest honor. Girls were told their duty was to support and pray for those who fought. The message was clear: life had meaning only through service to the nation. By the time those boys became soldiers, that idea was unshakable. Even pain was part of the lesson. In training, soldiers were beaten for the smallest mistake. They were denied rest to test endurance. Officers believed that cruelty built courage. To survive, a man had to suppress emotion. He could not show fear, sadness, or hesitation. If a comrade cried, others might strike him until he stopped. Weakness was seen as a disease that could infect the unit. Let's float over to the jungles of Burma. Imagine a small group of soldiers deep in the green darkness. Their uniforms are torn. Their bodies are covered in leeches. The air smells of decay and wet earth. They move silently, barefoot, rifles held close. They have not eaten properly in days. Yet no one complains. When a man collapses, others carry his weapon but leave his body behind. There is no time for mourning. The mission continues. Inside their minds, discipline was their only comfort. They believed suffering was purification. They believed the emperor watched them even from across the ocean. That invisible gaze gave them strength. In letters home, many wrote not of hardship, but of pride. "I am honored to serve," they said. "Do not worry for me. I am happy to die if it helps the empire." These words were repeated so often they became truth. Yet deep down, some began to question, especially as the war turned against Japan. When supplies stopped coming, when disease took more lives than bullets, when they saw villages burn and civilians suffer, a few wondered what it was all for. But to speak doubt aloud was dangerous. It meant dishonor. And dishonor could destroy an entire family's reputation. So they stayed silent, even as hope faded. Propaganda filled the silence. Leaflets and radio broadcasts told soldiers that Americans and British troops were cruel beasts. They would torture captives. They would defile women. They would burn temples. Such lies made surrender unthinkable. A captured soldier believed his death would be slow and shameful. So when the moment came, he would rather die by his own grenade. Let's drift for a moment to the Pacific island of Peleliu. It's 1944. The heat is unbearable. In the caves, Japanese soldiers crouch in darkness. They have been here for weeks. Their water supply is almost gone. They hear American flamethrowers above them. The air shakes with explosions. One soldier holds a letter from his mother. The paper is soft from sweat. He reads it again by the light of a dying candle. "My son," it says, "you are the pride of our family. Bring honor to our ancestors." He smiles faintly, folds the letter, and waits for dawn. When the order comes, he rushes out screaming, "Tenno Heika Banzai, long live the emperor." He does not come back. For the Japanese soldier, death was not an end. It was transformation. Shinto beliefs taught that spirits of the fallen would protect the homeland. Buddhist teachings softened the fear of dying. Together, they made the idea of sacrifice almost sacred. A man who died in battle became a guardian spirit. His name might be written at the Yasukuni Shrine in Tokyo, where the emperor's subjects would one day bow in his memory. But not every soldier saw glory. Many saw only endless pain. In prisoner camps, captured Japanese soldiers often refused food. They felt their lives were already over. To be captured was to lose the right to live. Some even attacked fellow prisoners for showing joy at surviving. The mental cage of honor was stronger than any wall. Still, small acts of humanity survived. On islands like New Guinea and the Philippines, Japanese soldiers sometimes shared food with local villagers, even when starving themselves. Some helped wounded enemies. Others buried fallen foes with quiet respect. These moments were rarely recorded, but they reveal that behind the steel of obedience, there still beat human hearts. Let's move now to 1945. Japan is collapsing. Cities are burning from American firebombs. The Navy is shattered. The emperor's divine image begins to fade. Soldiers at the front still fight bravely, but many know the truth: the war is lost. Letters from home speak of hunger and destruction. Families are gone. Villages are ashes. And yet, orders come to prepare for final defense. Operation Ketsugo, the last plan for Japan's survival. Millions of civilians were trained to fight with bamboo spears. Schoolgirls practiced throwing grenades. Soldiers built underground bunkers, preparing for an American invasion that never came. They believed they would all die defending their homeland. It was a vision of noble suicide on a national scale. Then, in August, came the unimaginable. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were destroyed in an instant. When the emperor's voice finally spoke on the radio, many soldiers fell to their knees and wept. Some refused to believe it was him. Others could not understand the meaning of surrender. The war is over, their officers told them. But for men raised to think death was victory, peace felt like betrayal. Many officers took their own lives. Some soldiers burned their regimental flags, unable to face the shame of defeat. Others wandered aimlessly, silent and lost. The empire they had given everything for had vanished overnight. And then there were those who simply could not stop fighting. They disappeared into jungles, mountains, and islands, ghosts of a war that would not die. For years they hunted in silence, unaware the world had moved on. The mind of the Japanese soldier was not simply one of war. It was a reflection of Japan itself, disciplined, spiritual, proud, and at times, blind to its own humanity. The war had stripped these men of choice, but it also left a mark on their souls that would shape generations to come. The war that never ended, the return, the memory, and the legacy when the guns finally went silent in 1945, the war did not truly end for Japan. It lingered in the hearts of those who survived, like a shadow that refused to fade. The Japanese soldier, who had once marched proudly for the emperor, now faced a world that no longer recognized him. The empire was gone. The uniform he wore was now a reminder of defeat. In the first months after surrender, millions of soldiers began their journey home. They came by ship, train, and foot, thin, sick, and silent. Many had been prisoners of war, released from camps in the Pacific or in Asia. Others had spent years stranded on islands, surviving on roots and seawater. When they finally returned, Japan itself had become unrecognizable. Cities like Tokyo and Osaka were ruins. Families were gone. The people who had once cheered them off to war now looked away in quiet shame. Let's drift to a small station in 1946. A train screeches to a halt. Dust fills the air. Soldiers step out slowly, their faces hollow. They carry what little they own in small cloth bags. A mother spots her son in the crowd. She rushes forward, tears in her eyes. But when she reaches him, she stops. The boy she sent to war is now a man she barely knows. His eyes are distant. His smile never comes. They walk home together in silence. These returning soldiers were called asterisk, demobilized men asterisk, but the truth is that they were lost men. Many could not find work. Some hid their past, afraid of the hatred and suspicion that surrounded Japan's wartime image. The emperor they had worshipped had spoken only once his radio address announcing surrender. In it, he called upon his people to endure the unendurable. For many soldiers, those words became their only compass in a country struggling to rebuild from ashes. The Allied occupation brought new rules. Japan was forced to disarm. The once feared Imperial Army was dissolved. The new constitution, written under American guidance, declared that Japan would never again maintain military forces for war. For the old soldiers, this was difficult to accept. Their identity had been erased. Some joined the police or found work rebuilding roads. Others drifted into quiet lives in the countryside, tending small farms. But the memory of the battlefield never left them. Let's float for a moment to a hospital ward in post-war Tokyo. A soldier lies in bed, his legs gone. Nurses move quietly around him. Outside, snow falls gently on the city's broken streets. He stares at the ceiling and whispers to himself, "I did what I was told." No one answers. His medals, once symbols of glory, now sit in a small box under his pillow. He never opens it again. The people of Japan, too, were changing. The war had shattered their faith in the divine emperor. For centuries, they had believed he was a living god. But now, under American pressure, Emperor Hirohito announced that he was human. The shock rippled across the nation. Soldiers who had died believing they fought for a god were now mourned under the truth of mortality. The spiritual foundation of Japan had cracked. Yet out of that brokenness, a new Japan began to rise. Schools changed their lessons. Children no longer learned about dying for the emperor. They learned about democracy, peace, and science. Factories that once built weapons now built radios, cameras, and cars. The soldiers who survived watched as the nation they had fought to protect became something entirely different, modern, prosperous, and peaceful. Still, some memories refused to fade. For years after the war, families waited for sons who would never return. They kept small shrines in their homes with photographs, incense, and the rising sun flags that once went to battle. Mothers prayed each morning not for victory, but for forgiveness. And then there were the holdouts, the soldiers who never heard of surrender or refused to accept it. In the jungles of Guam, Indonesia, and the Philippines, they lived as ghosts. They hunted, hid, and repaired their weapons as if the war still raged. Locals sometimes spotted them, thin and sunburned, moving silently through the trees. They built small shelters of bamboo and tin, reading old newspapers dropped from planes, unsure what to believe. One of the last was Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda, stationed on Lubang Island in the Philippines. He continued to fight long after 1945, ambushing police patrols, stealing food from farms, and waiting for the order to return. It wasn't until 1974, nearly 30 years later, that his former commander came to find him. When the old man told him the war was over, Onoda stood in silence. Then he lowered his rifle, saluted, and wept. The world had changed, but he had not. When Onoda returned to Japan, he was treated as both hero and relic. Crowds cheered him, yet others saw in him the madness of blind obedience. He represented a generation that had sacrificed everything for ideals that no longer existed. Still, his story reminded Japan of how deeply the war had shaped its people. The memory of those soldiers remains complicated. Japan's post-war society learned to look at them with both pride and sorrow. Memorials were built. Poems were written. Films were made to show their struggle not as glory but as warning. At the Izukuni Shrine in Tokyo, where the spirits of the war dead are enshrined, visitors still bow in silence. Some come to honor courage, others come to remember pain. Let's pause here and look deeper into the heart of that memory. The Japanese soldier of World War II was not just a warrior. He was a reflection of Japan's own identity crisis, a nation caught between tradition and modernity, between faith and reason. His loyalty was absolute, yet it came at a cost too heavy for one generation to bear. In the decades that followed, Japan rebuilt faster than anyone expected. The country became a symbol of peace and technology, but under that progress, quiet wounds remained. Veterans gathered in small associations, sharing stories they could not tell anyone else. They spoke of hunger, of fear, of watching friends die. They spoke of guilt for what they had done and for what they could not undo. Some broke down in tears after years of silence. In Japanese culture, there is a word *gaimen. Asterisk. It means to endure the unbearable with dignity. That word captures the spirit of post-war Japan. It was how the nation moved forward without forgetting. It was how the soldiers lived with what they carried. Let's drift to a modern-day scene. The sun rises over a quiet shrine in Hiroshima. A small group of elderly men stands in uniform. Their medals polished, but their steps slow. They bow deeply before the memorial flame. Around them, young students watch in silence. These men once fought under the rising sun. Now they stand beneath it as witnesses of its cost. One of them turns to the children and says softly, "War is not glory, it is loss." The students bow in return. For a brief moment, the generations are connected through memory, through pain, through the quiet promise never to repeat what was done. The story of the Japanese soldier is not one of victory or defeat. It is a story of human endurance, of men taught to believe in something greater than themselves, and of a nation that learned too late the price of that belief. From the burning islands of the Pacific to the peaceful gardens of modern Tokyo, that echo remains. Even now, when the world studies the war, the image of the Japanese soldier still stands disciplined, loyal, tragic. He is both hero and caution, both devotion and warning. As the last veterans fade from this world, their silence tells us one thing more powerful than any weapon, that war leaves no true winners, only survivors. So when we speak of history, and when we remember the men who fought beneath the rising sun, we do not honor war itself. We honor the humanity that somehow endured within it, the courage to live again, the humility to change, and the strength to remember. That is the legacy of the Japanese soldier. The empire fell, but the lesson remains.